Hello, everyone. Welcome to Avaya's Healthy Aging Curriculum. I am Andy Anderson. My partner, Ike Allen, and I are teachers, co-mentors, and the co-owners of Avaya University. Avaya is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you so much for being here. Our fellow teacher, Dr. Jacqueline Chan, is here today to talk with you about your brain and longevity. Dr. Chan is a board-certified integrative medicine physician, and she believes that compassion, presence, and grace are crucial healing forces along with intelligently applied clinical knowledge. Dr. Chan also believes that health means more than the absence of disease. I love this. And optimal health includes operating out of the highest expression of our soul's purpose. Thank you so much for being here with us, Dr. Chan.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into this. And obviously the topic of the brain and longevity, what a great thing to explore. So let's just dive right in. So I guess let's start with what happens as we each get older. What's happening to our brain?
Yeah, well, and before I even answer that, I just want to give you a few statistics about the brains of Americans, okay? So 26% of the US population is on a psychiatric medication, and that's pretty
Wow.
shocking. And learning disabilities have gone up 16%. And dementia Alzheimer's dementia wasn't even on the top 10 list of causes of death, and now it's number 6. And by the time we're 85, we have a 45% risk, almost half, of having dementia. And this is like crippling, okay? Because dementia eventually leads to the necessity for 24-hour care, and caregivers have a six times increased risk of dying earlier, about 10 years earlier, than the person they're taking care of, because it's so exhausting. So part of, it's interesting, but my the definition of my name, Jacqueline, my first name, is actually guardian of the path. And so part of my job as a physician is to help you from not being one of those statistics, because those statistics are devastating. So even if you're feeling great right now, you want to kind of, in terms of prevention, you can actually, the signs of dementia will happen 20 years before it ever actually occurs, and it can be reversed. And this is something that has been proven through the work of Dale Bredesen. He wrote a book called End Alzheimer's, and the Buck Institute of Research is just up the road. So basically, it's a hot topic, and And then just dementia aside, there's the issues of cognitive decline, loss of memory, brain fog, attention deficit, and mood issues. And so the good news is what's good for the brain is good for the whole body. And when you start taking care of your brain as an organ, and I also mean the whole central nervous system, that is going to help your overall health, because our brain and our central nervous system is how we perceive our reality. It's how we connect with others and have a sense of presence. It's how we make decisions. It's how we feel our emotions. It's kind of like everything. I call it our CIA, our Central Intelligence Agency. And it also houses your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, which is your stress response. So a lot of what I want to convey today is that, taking care of your brain also allows you to bring resilience into your entire body for your life. Now, what's the most important thing to know? There's a lot here, but I'll try to be concise. Well, first of all, I just want to state some facts aside from those scary statistics, but what actually happens as we age with our brains. As we age, we lose about 85,000 brain cells a day. Now, thank God we have 100,000 billion of them to begin with. But there's certain things that begin to decline that help the brain. So what's one of the things that really helps the brain? Well, one of them actually is hormones. And that's something that most doctors, I didn't learn this in medical school. I learned this through several institutions, the American Board of Holistic Medicine, the Institute of Functional Medicine. I learned this before those institutions even existed, So basically, hormones really help protect neuroplasticity. One of the hormones is DHEA, and after the age of 35, that goes down 25% a year.
Hmm.
And that's produced by adrenal glands. The other hormone that naturally goes down, as all women know, is estrogen and progesterone from menopause. And so estrogen really helps with short-term memory and the sprouting of short-term memory neurons in the memory aspect of our brain called our hippocampus. And progesterone also helps with neuroplasticity. And they also help with actually our brain chemistry. They act almost like antidepressants. They act as they bind to serotonin receptor sites, which is our happy mood hormone. So our hormones go down, and as our hormones go down, um, uh, it puts the burden on the adrenal glands. So, and then there's two more things that probably really affect the brain. One is blood supply, because blood provides oxygen, right? Now, you can go weeks without food, you can go 4 days without water, but you can only go 4 minutes without oxygen.
Mm.
If you cannot breathe past 4 minutes, your brain starts to die. And so lack of oxygen, which would be through, let's say, a diminished blood circulation. So if someone has plaque disease from cholesterol, or if they have high blood pressure, or, if they actually have scar tissue in their brain from a concussion, all of that can affect your circulation. And then last but not least is mitochondria.
Mm.
So mitochondria are the little organelles inside every cell of the body, and we have 500 to 2,000 of them, and they make ATP, or energy, which is like the electricity in your house. And they go down. We lose half of our mitochondria between ages 20 and 40, and another half between ages 40 and 70. So that's sort of like the aging process, what happens. And there are things that you can do to help in every single factor that I've just named. And that's all, a lot of what I'm writing about in my book, as well as there's lab work that you can use to track it and identify it, and supplements for help.
Mm, awesome. So, okay. So we just talked about all sorts of different things. So like what in the short term, you mentioned a few of these things, right? Brain fog, mood issues, anxiety, depression, attention deficit. So what can we do to help ourselves in the short term to treat things like that? And I know that you said, right, like it's all connected. So whatever we're doing right in the short term is going to help us out long term also.
Yeah. So, the foundation, and I know that you have a lot of other excellent speakers on this talk, and doctors, so that's fantastic. Diet, of course, your background in nutrition is like the foundation. And I would say that the phytonutrients that are from fruits and vegetables of different colors are very important. And also is keeping blood sugar even. Because that puts a stress on your adrenal glands. So the very basics of diet would be, eat breakfast like a king or a queen so that your blood sugar stays even throughout the day. And avoid, of course, the whites, white flour, white sugar, and animal saturated fats. Now there's just a couple, I'm going to try to, say it concisely, but there are some superfoods for the brain, and one of them is very inexpensive and very common. And they did a study on 80,000 people looking at longevity in Japan, Sweden, and Germany, and they found one food that lowered dementia risk by 8%. And you want to guess what that food is?
Oh my gosh, blueberries. I don't know. I don't know.
Beans.
What is it?
Beans.
Oh my gosh. I
Yep.
just had beans
Yep.
for lunch.
Yeah, and it didn't even really matter which beans. So in Japan, it was the soybean. In Sweden, it was the kidney bean. Of course, they have to be, cooked and all. They can't be eaten raw. But yeah, so beans, 2 tablespoons of beans a day actually lowers the risk of dementia by 8%.
Wow.
So yeah, very just some simple things that I can put out there. The other ingredient is fish oil. So our brain is actually 80% fat, and that's because the fat creates the cell membranes, and so that's around the cell membrane itself. And you want your cell membrane to be fluid, because the receptors for different hormones and nerve signaling happen through the cell membrane. And if they're rigid and kind of tight, then that communication doesn't happen well. And so fish oil is essential. The essential fats means that your body doesn't make them. So you have to get them from your diet. So and it's interesting, I find that in Finland, they have like some of the highest scores of happiness and also of cognitive ability. And in Finland, they're eating deep water fish, So the second thing is, if you get fish oil, you have several different options. One is to eat fish. And that's a little tricky nowadays, because the large fish, like tuna, mahi, swordfish, they have a lot of mercury in them because they eat the smaller fish, and that mercury biomagnifies. So if you're going to eat fish, you want to eat smaller fish. Sardines, tilapia, haddock, salmon, of course, is excellent. But then you want to avoid fish that's been farmed and that's been dyed. Like I know with salmon, they sometimes inject them with a color dye. So that's why I'm a proponent of fish oil, because then you don't have to worry about the fish, whether it's farmed, whether it's got, chemicals in it. And you want to get a D8 component of, actually the statistics are 800 milligrams of DHA and 1,000 milligrams of EPA. And there's an actual lab test that will check for a specific number. It's called your omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acid ratio. And if that ratio is at 7 or higher, it actually lowers your anxiety and depression and cognitive issues by 50%, which is amazing. I mean, that's better than most psychiatric medicines. It outperforms them. The only brand that I recommend that's over the counter is Nordic Naturals, because you really want to have a clean source. I like to use a fermented kind that comes from the same fish that they use for Nordic Naturals, with the same purification, because the fermented kind is more bioavailable, and it's actually like 300% more bioavailable. And I've been tracking the blood and people who are on this, and they totally notice a difference. Like, oh my God, I feel like I can think better. I can retain my memory. So those are two specific things under diet.
I know Nordic Naturals. I haven't thought of them in a while, but I remember that was when I did my master's in nutrition. That was one of the brands that we learned about regularly in, different classes, and it was highly, highly recommended. So absolutely, good to see they're still going strong.
Yeah, absolutely. There's for long-term benefits, kind of it's your lifestyle. So there was a famous author, Swedenborg is his name, and he wrote, I don't know the exact number, but several volumes of encyclopedias. He was one of these incredible thinkers, like in the time of Darwin. And it was like the Renaissance age, where he could just get on a boat and go to whatever country and study with, he could study theater and science and physics. And there were some amazing kind of broad thinkers at that time period. And he wrote a final book before he died, and everyone wanted to know what was in that book. And there was one sentence in that book, and it said, "The secret to longevity is to keep your feet warm and your head cool." And so, I think what he was saying is, we all have strong minds, and our minds can get chaotic and race, and that creates some of our stress, and the fears and the worries and all of that. And so by cooling the mind, whether that means a meditation practice, whether that means, regular exercise, but studies have actually shown now that meditation does cause a thickening in the brain of the white matter, which is pretty amazing. So we've actually tracked people who meditate regularly, and they've shown that meditation does benefit people if it's from an iPhone app.
Mm.
So I'm part of an iPhone app called Mindrise, which I really like. There's all kinds of music and meditations. Um, so incorporating some way in which you can relax. Now, some people meditate when they're riding their bike, or when they're playing a sport, they kind of get into this flow. So it doesn't have to be like sitting on a cushion,
Right.
it could be but essentially what happens is your mind quietens. So if your mind quietens when you're playing a sport and you're just kind of in the zone, that's great. That's what you want. That's the feeling that you want. The second thing is that, I talked about circulation before and oxygenation. So, of course, exercise. But there's a specific exercise that they've examined called the 7-minute scientific workout. And you can get an iPhone app for that called 7 Minute. And it's as beneficial as a 60-hour intense workout. And what it is it's using large muscles like the arms and the legs for 20-minute spurts, 20-second spurts, and then 10 minutes of rest, and then 20-second spurts and 10 minutes of rest. So that excuse of like, well, I don't have time to go to the gym, da 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 da, like you can't really use that anymore. Just move, but move intensely. So the 7 minutes is intense. It's full out. You don't want to be having a conversation during that time. You're going to be pushing yourself, but in 7 minutes you're done. And exercise has been consistently showing that it reduces cancer and dementia dramatically. Now there's also some certain unfortunately, we live in a toxic world. Okay. So even if you did all the exercise and all the dietary things and even took some supplements, you're still going to be breathing the air. You're going to be drinking the tap water, probably even cooking with tap water. And unfortunately, at least in the United States, the environmental standards of toxins are not protective enough for us. And I'll name one extremely ubiquitous toxin, which I also talk about in my book, and that's glyphosate or Roundup. And so glyphosate it's a GMO foods that have been modified, and then they're sprayed with Roundup, which is a chemical toxin that kills the weeds, and they're considered resistant to Roundup or Roundup Ready. And in that process, there's this chemical component called glyphosate, and it's as bad as gluten. It's actually kind of worse than gluten. But the thing is, it's really ubiquitous, and there's really no way to measure it. So it's, we have it in our drinking water now. It's in all the soy and corn are the highest sprayed crops. And so then anything with high fructose corn syrup in it, which would be your tomato sauce, it would be your salad dressings that you buy off the shelf. You have to kind of like look at all the labels. And it comes back to the closer you can just make from scratch. Like if you can make your own salad dressing from scratch with olive oil and vinegar, rather than buying it pre-made. Or if you buy stuff, you really need to get organic, or look for the non-GMO. And there is a free non-GMO shopping guide. It's just literally called non-GMO shopping guide that you can get online. But the tricky thing is I'm starting to measure GMO now in my patients, because the glyphosate in our body causes inflammation in the gut, and it also blocks the amino acid pathways in the plants called the shikimate pathway that they use, that we need to make our happy mood hormones. So it's really, it can get quite complex. But essentially, you got to think about things like your Mexican food, like corn chips. And I mean, I love Mexican food, but you can bet they're not using organic corn chips unless it's an organic Mexican place. So I like to measure it, and getting rid of it can be a little tricky. But Jeffrey Smith, who has a great movie called Secret Ingredients, and there's another really good movie on GMO called OMG GMO. He actually has recorded the symptoms that people have with GMO, and 50% of them have memory issues and brain fog. So that's a really high percentage. Either really going non-GMO or having a way of kind of measuring your GMO and tracking that is a good thing. And then plastic. So these are things that are really hard to avoid. I mean, when I went to Europe last summer, I could not get water that wasn't served in a plastic bottle. Every restaurant would serve me water in a plastic bottle. And I remember in the days when America was kind of ahead pushing the plastic bottles, and I was like, yes, I can go to Europe, and they use a pitcher, a glass pitcher.
Right.
They don't use plastic, and now all of Europe is using plastic bottles everywhere. And plastic, they thought that it was metabolized quickly by the body, and they've actually discovered that that's not the case. And not only is it not the case, but it doesn't really come out in our urine or in our poop. It comes out in our sweat. And so there's certain chemicals that our bodies don't get rid of very well, and they bioaccumulate over age. And so then what happens is, as you age, and after the age of 50, the immune system's going down, you have toxins. Some of these toxins have a half-life of like 60 to 100 years, and they're staying in your system, and they're bioaccumulating, and then the system gets overwhelmed, and boom, cancer blossoms. And the person goes, how did this happen? I've been going to the gym 4 days a week, and I eat fruits and vegetables, and my wife does home cooking. Like, how can this be happening to me? Well, if you ate corn chips, or if you drank tap water and you didn't use a filter, I mean, we are inundated in these chemicals. So you have to be almost like a detective, like a sleuth. And so, I recommend reverse osmosis water. There's a new filter that's on the tabletop called Aqua True. That's quite affordable. And then, getting the non-GMO shopping guide, and then, considering going to a doctor where you can actually have it measured.
Got it. Awesome.
There is,
so much good stuff, right? Like
I know. But actually the point I wanted to make about the plastics, because I was kind of getting off into this environmental toxic tangent here, is sauna. So sauna is like an amazing, I have my own home sauna now, and I actually got a sauna that's called Relax Sauna. And if you want, I can give you the name and the phone number of a woman who can help people get that sauna, but it's a portable one. So I love it because I can fold it up, and it's not like, I didn't have to spend thousands of dollars to build a sauna in my home. I mean, if you can, that's great. There are certain substances that come out of our sweat, such as plastics and other plastic substitutes, as well as benzene and organophosphates and fluoride components that don't come out any other way. And I think it's interesting because of the Finnish studies as well. And so in Finland, they have studies of over 6,000 people, showing a 20% drop in their systolic blood pressure with sauna, and a 30% drop in mortality from all causes. It's pretty dramatic, and it shows that the more times you do sauna, the increased benefit. So at a minimum of twice a week for 20 minutes. And if you can, let's say you actually have hypertension, or you're already on a number of pharmaceutical drugs, I'd do it 4 or 5 times a week. So that's also in my book, Sauna, and the sauna cocktail that you can do to amp up the benefits of sauna, as well as the resource of, where to get the sauna and so on and so forth. And I have some resources too for GMO and certain supplements that can help get rid of that.
So
So
quick,
there's this, yeah,
can I ask you a quick question about the
sure.
sauna? Like, so like, right, I'm envisioning, right, when I used to go to like a gym back in Boulder when I lived there, and there was a sauna room and or there was a steam room. So, right,
Hmm.
both places you're going to sweat, but obviously, right, the steam room, you're sweating pretty quick because you're like literally like in a cloud. Like, what's the difference and why is sauna like so like much better or more beneficial to the,
Well, there's been more studies on sauna for
okay.
one. And the main thing is sweating. Okay. So that's another thing. If you work out and you're dripping sweat and you do that 3 times a week, great. You don't need a sauna. Okay.
Okay.
So, but it's easier to study sauna than it is how much people sweat when they work out and all of that. Um, there's one study I read about comparing like steaming to sauna, and they actually get rid of different things. It's interesting. They
Oh.
get rid of different chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and So they both get rid of chemicals in the body. They're just there's a slight difference, and that was one study.
Okay.
So I
Cool.
would say that if you only have access to steam, that's good. And once again, if you're sweating when you exercise, that's great. That's great. You
I
know.
think of living in coastal North Carolina in the summer, and it's so humid down here that, right, like the sweat is coming no matter what. So,
Yeah. Well, I hardly sweat because I'm in Northern California, and
yep.
it's
Yeah.
like springtime here year round. I mean, in
Right.
the wintertime, it gets down to 50, but it hardly ever gets really hot.
Yeah.
Knock on wood. I mean, the temperature's been rising,
Mm,
but
right.
I'm on the coast. You know, I'm near San Francisco, so the
Mhm.
fog rolls in, and Mark Twain said the coldest winter he ever had was summer in San Francisco, and he's right.
Nice.
I mean, it's freezing, and in August it's freezing. So,
Oh, there it
you
is.
know,
That's good.
yeah,
So sorry. Side
yeah.
note, tangent, but I guess one other thing I'd love for you to talk about sleep. How can, sleep help us with things obviously in the world of healthy aging and longevity?
And I know you have somebody also talking about
Yeah.
sleep. Um, One of the most dramatic things I learned about sleep and the research I was doing for my book was the fact that our brain shrinks 60% when we're sleeping,
Wow.
and all the toxins get flushed out. So imagine that it's kind of like you go into high tide. So your brain is so important that it's sitting in this protective skull, and it's surrounded by fluid called cerebrospinal fluid. So it's like it's in a water balloon, because it's one of the most important organs in our entire body. So we've got this protective helmet, and at night the cerebrospinal fluid fills up and it increases, and the brain shrinks to 60%, and that fluid, the tide comes in all in between the neurons, and it starts cleaning the brain.
Mm,
It's like taking a mop bucket and dumping the water out on the floor and letting it soak up all the toxins, and then it flushes out by coming down your spinal column. And that's pretty
mm,
darn amazing.
that
And
is.
so the things that it's flushing out are, viruses and toxins and things that create agitation in the brain. And that's when the brain develops what's called amyloid plaque, which is the number one kind of an anatomical anomaly they find in Alzheimer's dementia, is these amyloid plaques forming. And so sleep actually helps flush out those amyloid plaques, as well as certain herbs, one of which is ashwagandha, which is, really good for the adrenals, which maybe has already been mentioned in some of the other talks. So the other thing that happens in sleep, which is really important, is short-term memory becomes long-term memory. And if you are studying for something, let's say you have, you're in the middle of a project or you have to sit for an exam and you feel really tired, you should go ahead and take a nap, like even if it's just a 5 or 10 minute nap, because that allows what you're memorizing to go into long-term memory. And I remember in med school, I would get just overwhelmed with fatigue and I would sleep for 5 or 10 minutes and I would wake up refreshed and I would go right back to it. And so I was sort of
Mm.
naturally doing that. And so don't necessarily grab the coffee and push through, just take a nap, you know?
Mhm.
So,
Got it.
yeah, those are the two things about sleep. Sleep can be really affected by Wi-Fi. One of my side passions has been Wi-Fi, and I've been to several town hall meetings about 5G, my concerns about 5G and cell phone towers, and because I noticed that some of my patients had major issues with insomnia. And so if you get insomnia, especially if you have like a ringing in your ears, that could be from Wi-Fi. And so you want to try unplugging your Wi-Fi router. I've had some patients with like years of headaches and insomnia. They unplug the Wi-Fi router and it's all gone, so because those are very subtle waves and they're actually disturbing to our biology, and they cause the cell membrane to kind of get rigid and hard. Now, if you think you really have a severe problem in it, you can get your home assessed. There's actually a degree that people have in home assessment for toxins in the home, including Wi-Fi. It's called building biologist, and it's a degree that came out of Germany. And so there are certain meters, and people can have their walls assessed for dirty electricity, and then there's other things you can do about that. But people are most affected by Wi-Fi when they sleep. Of course, then there's the other things like your nighttime alcohol, because alcohol will interfere with your deepest REM sleep. So if you are going to drink alcohol, happy hour is better than 8 or 9 o'clock at night. So and of course, alcohol in general is not good for the brain. It's one of the causes of dementia. Being from California, everybody here is really into their wine. I'm like right next door to Sonoma and Napa. I have some patients who live there. So I'm not going to tell you can't ever drink wine, but this is another interesting thing about wine. And I talk about all of this in my book is wine has lead. I didn't want to know this, but there's an article on it's called Wine and Lead Poisoning. So, that kind of brings up heavy metals. So heavy metals can be really toxic to the brain. And almost all of my patients, I measure their heavy metals and I do a heavy metal detox. Now, interestingly, sauna and sweat is a way that we detox our metals.
Got it.
So that's another great side benefit too to sweating.
Got it. Awesome. So just a little heads up, we have about 10 minutes-ish left. So I'd love it if you'd talk about brain cells, right? Can we grow new brain cells?
Yeah, you can. So they have found new brain cells in 80-year-olds when they've done autopsies. New, like embryological brain cells. And we didn't know this could happen. So you absolutely can. You are, in fact, growing new brain cells. And there's a couple things that you can do to increase what's called brain-derived nerve factor. And it's a nerve factor that increases brain cell growth. One of them is intense physical exercise. So that 7-minute exercise actually increases brain-derived nerve factor. The other is intermittent fasting, which somebody else maybe have mentioned on your summit already. So this is all how it sort of like weaves into the brain. And the other is a specific mushroom called lion's mane. And lion's mane is it's pretty amazing at how it increases by several hundred percentages the brain-derived nerve factor. Now, let's say you're increasing your brain, you're doing intermittent fasting, or maybe you're taking lion's mane. Those brain cells need to know where to go. Okay, so you have to lay down new pathways in your brain. And how do you lay down new pathways in your brain? Well, it's like repatterning your responses in life. And the principles, so you've got to sort of challenge your brain. Now, certain ways to do that is anything having to do with balance and coordination. So actually picking up dance classes when ballroom dance classes, or sport, or yoga where you're standing in the tree pose. I go to a specific balance class at the gym where we're on Bosu balls and we're balancing on one foot with a ball and we're throwing it to each other. Those things are actually really challenging for your brain, and they help your brain. Picking up a new instrument, the brain reflexology points are in the tips of the fingers. So playing guitar, I started learning harp, piano, that's all really drumming, that's actually all really good. Learning a new language, or going back and reviewing some math. And then there are specific movements that can enhance neuroplasticity. And there's a whole branch now called the polyvagal theory, which is, about, how to help with trauma using very slow caressing type movements. So there's a whole somatic branch related to this, and I created a meditation in which I kind of incorporated slow movement based on the principles of neuroplasticity that include things like imagination and not being goal oriented, and definitely being within a container that feels very safe and inviting. And So I talk about that meditation in the book, and eventually I'd like to have a videotape of it. But stay open to a different kind of movement modality, and then challenging your brain, like I said, with those other things.
Awesome. Thank you. I love it. Yes. That's very encouraging, right? If we can grow new brain cells as we get older. So there it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd love it if you would actually talk about your book. So this is something that's coming out soon, and there's actually a button below, everybody, that links over to Dr. Chan's website where you can get registered in order to receive information about that new book. And could you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Thank you. So in the book, I'm talking about, it's about 9 different sections that can really help the brain, from many of which I've touched upon today. So everything from nourishing the brain to balancing your hormones, fixing the leaky gut, leaky brain axis, detoxification. I also include in there how to address trauma, because trauma creates a freezing in the nervous system, and that's really important. And also assessing energy management. So how much energy we put out, how much energy we receive, kind of like some life assessment, going through your inventory of needs. And I include in there osteopathic manipulation, because I'm an osteopathic physician. So cranial manipulation, the vagus nerve, and also hyperbaric oxygen. I'm medical director at a hyperbaric oxygen facility, and oxygen is incredible for people who have had a stroke or a concussion, or even the early signs of cognitive decline. And so that's what my book is about. And the final chapter is on soothing the mind and regenerative practices.
Excellent. And what about, is there something like unusual that you talk about in your book?
Well, probably both the hyperbaric oxygen, because a lot of people, and even a lot of doctors don't know about it. And one session of hyperbaric oxygen can actually double your stem cells. And oxygen has been shown to awaken the mitochondria in the brain that are asleep. Whenever there's brain damage, there's like an area in the brain called the penumbra that is not yet dead. It's just asleep, and oxygen kind of wakes that up. And at our facility called Advanced Hyperbaric Recovery from Marin, we've treated over 2,600 autistic children and cerebral palsy. And I've seen some people with speech impediments after stroke be able to regain it. And we've also treated people with just chronic fatigue who have brain aren't able to work. So basically they may be able to do the dishes and grocery shop, but they can't be an attorney again, or they can't be CEO of a company again. And so we actually put people back in the workforce. We help give them that additional benefit that they need. So I think hyperbaric oxygen is kind of a lesser known superhero. And then also the neuroplasticity, movement exercises, and one of my passions as well is intuition. And so kind of ultimately, to step out of the analytical mind and get into the intuitive self.
Got it. Awesome. Well, I encourage everyone to click the button below and go get more information about how they can get a copy of your new book. And thank you so much for offering that. Are there any last insights? Anything else that we've left out? We've covered a lot, but I'm sure there's more.
Well, the book is called Regenerate Your Brain, because I realize I'm talking about it, but I'm not naming it. It's Regenerate Your Brain. I think that the discoveries that we've had in neuroscience are actually really good news. You know, they're recognizing that neuroplasticity exists, that you can help increase your brain, and I would put preventative medicine um, right up front in your list, your to-do list, and your budget, if you will, because these things are, even if you're, you know, kind of doing everything right, we still are inundated with toxins. So I think addressing environmental toxins is really important.
Got it. Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for
Thank
doing
you.
this.
Yep. Thank you.
I appreciate it. And thank you
Yeah.
everyone for
Yeah.
tuning in, for showing up for yourself and tuning into Dr. Chan's class. And we'll see you again real soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.